What is up YouTube? I'm Royal, I'm rank 1 Wildrift, and in this video we're going over my tier list for patch 5.3b, and I actually think this is one of the best patches in a while. The champions that really deserve nerfs finally got nerfed, and I actually think that Wildrift is in one of its most balanced states that I have ever seen it. So let's jump straight into the Baron lane. And here we can talk a little bit about the newest champion, Ambessa. Ambessa is actually very powerful, just not in the Baron lane in my opinion. She just struggles too hard against these god tier champions. And even against most of the S tier champions, she lacks that early game power in the 1v1s, so she's gonna get bullied. In the god tier, we have the typical champions. I have moved down Aatrox and Darius. I just don't think that they're able to keep up with champions like Renekton, Camille, and of course the premier tank, which is Ornn. And I've actually added Maokai in the god tier. I think he's one of the safest and best tanks in the game. He brings so much value to every single team comp that I think I had to include him in the god tier. The S tier champions are of course still really good, so if that's what you want to play, you can definitely compete. A tier champions are a little weaker and they're mostly niche. However, a lot of them have their strengths and weaknesses. It's just about picking them in the right situations where they can shine, right? Moving on to the jungle. This is where I think Ambessa's best role is, because she's able to farm and scale in the early game, get her abilities, get to her power spikes, and that's where she can really shine. So I have her in the god tier. In the jungle, this tier list, I don't want you to be too focused on the god tier. I think honestly the difference between the god tier and S tier champions are not that big. There's so many viable champions in the jungle right now that you can really pick any champion in the S or god tier and you're gonna be doing great with them. Just pick them in the right situation and understand how to play them. Even love the A tier champions can be really good versus different team comps. So I've also added Echo in the god tier. He recently received some buffs that in my opinion were not needed whatsoever. I think he's absolutely insane right now. I thought he was strong already in the previous patches before these buffs, but these buffs honestly have pushed him over the edge in my opinion, and good Echo players will take advantage. And I'm sure he's going to be one of the strongest champions going forward this patch. Wukong and Vi are probably your best bruiser choices. Lee Sin, I always have him god tier because if you're a good Lee Sin, you're just winning every game. Lee Sin is such a good champion once mastered. However, he's probably the hardest champion in the game to play. I would say Yasuo is probably harder, but honestly Yasuo with his tank build is not as hard because you can get away with a lot more. With Lee Sin, if you make a mistake, you're done. But the power that the champion has is absolutely insane. I've also decided to include Lilia in the god tier. And again, the main reason that these champions are god tier is that they're slightly better than the S tier champions. But the difference is honestly not that big. You can succeed with most of the S tier champions as well. Anything below master tier especially, Shyvana can be very strong just by farming and then dominating the enemy team with raw stats, and especially if you have a Yuumi or a Lulu to help you out. I would also like to give a shout out to Shyvana. Initially in my patch breakdown, I said that the buffs are kind of placebo, but I didn't realize how useful just straight up stats can be in lower elos. Now let's move down into the mid lane, and of course I have Echo into the god tier again. He's very similar to Morgana in the sense that you can really get away with not having a good laning phase. You can just spam your first ability on the wave and just clear it instantly, and then you can look for roams, you can look for plays, you can look to be proactive, which is something Morgana doesn't really do. Even though her wave clear is really good, because of her kit, she struggles to really make proactive plays and you have to play with your team. However, Echo as a melee assassin can instantly wave clear and still look for a lot of plays. Of course, in the god tier we have the typical champions that I consider to be extremely strong right now that have not been touched, and that's Yasuo, Kassadin, and Syndra. I think they're just by far the best at what they do. In the S tier, we still have Heimerdinger, even though he got a solid nerf this patch. I think that made him more balanced. However, his strengths are still there. It's still impossible to fight into the Heimerdinger turrets. It won't be as overwhelming, but I still think he's a very solid pick. Swain is in the S tier from last patch, and Galio, they received some very nice buffs last patch. They're great choices if you want to go for something tankier. Veigar is of course in S tier, she received some nice buffs last patch as well. Moving down to the ADCs, here's where we actually have the coolest buff in a while, and that's the mini Lucian rework. Lucian has become a lot weaker in the solo lanes because of the base AD nerfs, but now he's so strong in the dual lane and specifically in the late game. His burst damage is out of this world. If you pair him up with aggressive support like the Nautilus or even with a Nami for the burst, right? Lucian is absolutely insane, and he'll be joining Xayah and Varus in the God tier. In the S tier, we of course have the best ADC choices. If you want a hyper carry, you can go Tristana, you can go Zeri, you can go Sivir, Ezreal. MF is really strong after her buffs. Samira got some small buffs, I would say, and I'm still going to put her in the S tier. However, I don't think the buffs are that impactful. Another reason why she is in the S tier, though, is that the meta is slowly shifting away from Enchanter and Mage supports and more into melee supports, and that's where Samira shines the most. And that's what I would like to talk about in the support tier. So Lulu continues to be a God tier support, but with the Nautilus buffs, Nautilus is also going to be there. Maokai is also going to be God tier. And in the S tier, you see a lot of these aggressive supports like the Thresh, like the Alistar, like the Rakonda pair up nicely with Samira. I still rate Janna and Milio in S tier despite their nerfs. I think the Janna nerfs were actually quite small. You can just max your shield first and get around the nerfs. And Milio did get nerfed, but he was already really strong, so I think he'll continue to be in the S tier. Another huge buff is actually Blitzcrank. I think the Blitzcrank buffs are really nice, and he's going to be a great counter to most Mage and Enchanter supports. For example, now if you're playing against a Soraka and you do end up grabbing her, you will be one-shotting her. One of the problems that Blitzcrank had in the past was that even if you grabbed someone, you end up losing the fight because your damage was just not high and you didn't really provide a lot of value after the grab. So you would grab someone that would focus down your ADC and you would lose the 2v2. But now, because of how much damage is on his hook and on his ultimate, you'll be able to quickly burst down an Enchanter or a Mage. He's still gonna struggle against champions like Maokai or Ngali or Nautilus, because if you do end up grabbing them, again, they will just focus your ADC and one-shot your ADC. That's my tier list for this newest patch. If you have any secret picks you want to tell us about, please leave them down in the comments. If you disagree with any of my picks, please let me know. Help out the community. Comment below. I appreciate you watching this video. If you want more Wild Rift content, make sure to subscribe. Also, check out my second channel where I'm going to be regularly posting gameplays, link in the description.